Welcome, everybody. Here we are talking about using Chat GPT to address employee performance. I will tell you, this is one of the tools that I have found to be just invaluable, and one that continues to change and provide, I think, additional resources. But it's just another tool. I started using this a little over a year ago, and again, I can't tell you how impactful it's been for me in terms of what I do as a business owner, as an entrepreneur myself, but also in terms of how I use it with my clients. So, what I wanted to do is just give a brief background in terms of myself for those that don't know my background. There are a couple things in terms of my space that I come from. Right, I started my company back in 2008, Emory Leadership Group, where I work with individuals and organizations and teams about building better relationships, how to be more effective. I started a podcast back in 2008 that I run on a weekly basis. So I've missed a few here and there. And then I published a book a little over a year ago called The Leadership Bridge, which is all about how to engage employees and drive organizational excellence. And I will tell you, I can say that my book was written before ChatGPT, so it's all mine. Some of the companies that I've worked with, in more recent ones that I'm working with now, I'm trying to implement as much as I can or integrate the use of ChatGPT in that, which is what we're going to talk about today. I think the only way you get better at learning how to use ChatGPT is that you continue to sort of get online, take free courses like we're taking now, or take paid ones. There are a couple ones that I've listed here below. One was with Wharton, and the other was with Vanderbilt, and for some reason it's darkened out right now. The Wharton one was a little more involved, a little more expensive too. The Vanderbilt one was actually on Coursera that I completed a few weeks back, and it looked specifically at how to improve generative prompts, which is what we're going to talk about today. And I think that's the key to this. So before we get into this, objectives, right? We're going to talk about social needs, and I want to bring that up first because I think that's so important as we're talking about performance management and improving performance issues that we might be having. I think understanding social needs that we all have is really important in terms of understanding where the problems might be coming from in the first place. From there, we're going to talk about three types of generative prompts that I think are valuable that you can use. There are many different ways to use this. To me, I found these to be foundational, right? Is to start here. When you understand these, I think the options that utilizing a an AI source like ChatGPT or Claude or Bing, um, or any other one that you want to use, um, i- it will make it much easier for you to understand how to use those. But start with the basics. Couple things, and again, before we get started on this, ChatGPT is not cheating, and I think we have this guilt in us at times of, oh, well, it shouldn't be this easy. We shouldn't be using this. The best analogy that I've come up for with this is that back when I was in high school and in college, I worked with my brother-in-law on on his construction company, and we were starting to use pneumatic tools at that point, pneumatic nailers to do the framing on houses. And there was others that were sort of doing projects in the same neighborhood that we were working in that were just using hammers, right? The old framing hammers. And somehow using pneumatic tools was cheating at that point, right? Somehow you were cutting corners. When you would be hard pressed to go to a construction site now and find people not using pneumatic nailers. And I think what's important here is that you still need a hammer. We still need framing hammers. And I won't go into all the reasons why we still use these, but just because you have a pneumatic gun, you still need a hammer for a lot of different aspects. Along with that, what I think is more important is that just because I have a pneumatic nailer and it makes the job that I do a lot faster in terms of framing up a house, I still need to know how to frame the house. This thing isn't this magical gun that just because I have it, I know how to then frame a house. And I think the same thing with ChatGPT. It can make a lot of things a lot easier for us, but we still need to understand the concepts behind what we're doing so that we're actually using it effectively. And what I mean by that is I can't write an article on quantum physics because I don't know quantum physics. I could certainly ask ChatGPT to write it, but I don't know really if it's accurate or if it's the most valuable article that would put out there. I can use it for other things where I know that after I read it, like this makes sense. I'm going to use this, or this is how I'm going to tweak it. And I think it's important to recognize that because ChatGPT can do things like on a negative side, what we call hallucinate, where it gives us information that is clearly off the mark. And that's where, again, I think you need to understand what you're talking about. Along those lines, I look at ChatGPT as the genie. And what I mean by that is it will only provide what you know how to ask it for effectively. And I think that is critical here. This is all about knowing how to ask for information. And the better you are at asking for information, the more effective this genie is going to be. It will release the information that you need, but only based on how you ask the question. Those two things I think are important to recognize first. But as we get into this, what are the social needs that I mentioned, and why are these important? Well, I'm going to talk about a model that was developed back in 2008 by a neuroscientist named David Rock. This is called the SCARF model. It's an acronym for these 5 social needs that we have. And the importance of understanding these social needs is that when they're satisfied, we have what's called a reward response, meaning we become more engaged, we become more collaborative. But when they are absent or they've been violated, then we have what's called a avoid response, meaning we move away from this, or whoever's causing this, or we become less collaborative when that happens. So the 5 social needs in SCARF are status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. What I've done with my clients in terms of there's a lot of other research out there in regards to social needs is I've created what I call needs, because oftentimes that's what we're talking about is what are the needs of our employees. And I think understanding that is really important if you're going to be, I think, fully effective in terms of managing the performance of others. You need to understand what the basic human needs are that we have so that we know that we're satisfying these if we want to see things become productive. So the first one that we're going to talk about as it relates to needs is our network. And in the SCARF model, that's about relatedness. And my apologies for the sort of quirkiness on the slides here. But relatedness is all about feeling connected in the SCARF model. And when we talk about it in terms of network, of a social need that employees need to feel a sense of network, it's about feeling included, a sense of connection and belonging to where they are. And that's really important because in the sense of if I have an employee that I've singled out for performance issues, that could start to spark this sense of this person doesn't feel as though they belong to the group. Somehow they're being singled out. So I want you to remember that. So a couple ways that this happens, right? In terms of how violating the network or the need for network can happen. Isolation is one, poor team dynamics is another, and lack of support. Those are 3 ways that we can actually, I think, increase the likelihood that we're going to have issues with an employee when they feel like these things are not being met, because then we create what's called that avoid response or disengagement or non-collaboration. So the next one that we talk about is empowerment in this needs model. And as it relates to SCARF, it's called autonomy. So autonomy is about this needing to feel control over my work or the environment that I'm in. And empowerment, it is a need for an employee to feel as though they have some say in what they're doing and how they do it. And this isn't to say that, right, everybody just gets to show up and do whatever they want during the day, but we all feel a need, or there's some need that we want to have control over what we're doing. And if people feel as though, as we'll see here, some of the ways that this might show up, if I feel like being micromanaged, I have limited decision making, or maybe the rules, the procedures really stifle what I'm doing, then again, there's a potential here that we're going to run into disengagement or employee issues that start to happen. So empowerment is really important here for employees. The next one is around equity. And this is a sense of fairness as it relates to SCARF, right? Transparency, fair exchange. Equity in this model could be interpreted as ensuring that there are equal opportunities for people, that we're all on this team, we're all treated the same way. And perception is really important here as well, because an employee could feel like somehow I get singled out for issues where other people on this team, they do the same thing and they never get called out for this. So I think equity is really important to remember here, and perception of equity. So how does it show up, right? Perceived biases, inequitable rewards, right? Somebody gets more praise than I do, or they get singled out for what they're doing. There's a lack of transparency. Decisions seem to be arbitrary in how they're made, or at least by my perspective, which then makes me feel as though things aren't fair. We're not all treated the same way here. So it's an important one for us to recognize. The next one is around dignity in the needs model, and as it relates to SCARF, it's about status, right? So status is about our feeling of importance. So if we think about this from the standpoint of dignity, then it's around feeling valued, respected for what I'm doing, and how important that is. And I think as leaders, we play a heavy role in this of creating this sense of dignity or status within our teams and those people that work with us. So some ways that this can be violated, right? We don't recognize people for what they're doing. This can impact their level of worth or how they feel respected, valued, appreciated. Disrespectful behavior, right? How I speak to somebody or how I ignore them could create this. Role diminishment. Maybe somebody on my team, I've taken some of their responsibilities away from them and given them to somebody else. That can create this sense of a lack of dignity or respect or feeling valued. So important one for us to recognize. The last one is around stability. And this is from the standpoint of SCARF is about certainty, that we want to have some sense of clarity, understanding that the rules, that there's consistency here with how people are treated. So job insecurity, right? Not having a feeling of knowing what I'm doing. Frequent changes can create this lack of stability, lack of clear direction. Those are three areas that really can create disengagement or a lack of collaboration or problems when people don't feel as though they understand what are the rules of the road here, or that there's arbitrary sort of behaviors, even though we set their clear expectations, we're not following through on those. So again, I think I just wanted to set the groundwork. I think this model of needs or SCARF is really important. And think about this from the standpoint of onboarding people, because each one of those things becomes really important. And I think in this environment that we're in right now, if we want to talk about how do we prevent poor behaviors from starting, I think it starts with onboarding. And when we onboard correctly, when we think about that, the needs of employees, right? Creating an environment where people feel as though they're connected right out of the gate. They feel like they're belonging. They feel like they're empowered. Yeah, asking people right out of the gate, how how they want to work, what things are important to them, right? When we create equity right from the get-go, setting clear expectations and rules, and we follow them. um, Status, creating a level of status early on for individuals, recognizing them for what they're doing, and then creating, again, stability, making it very clear in terms of what the rules are, or what the expectations are, or how the onboarding process is going to go for them. All of those things become really important as it relates to onboarding people, and I think setting the stage for reducing the chance that we're going to run into problems. All right, so foundation is set. Now let's talk about some of the ways that we can use ChatGPT. And again, all I've done is I've broken this thing down into three different areas. We're talking about general prompts. We're going to talk about what are called persona prompts. And then the last thing we'll talk about are what I call interview prompts. So the first one, general prompts. How can we use ChatGPT? This is one way that just starting out, we can use it. I could say, as a leader, what is important for me to consider when addressing an employee whose performance has slipped? This is for somebody that says, look, I'm having a problem right now. I don't even know where to start. What's a way that I could start to use chat? And what it then does is says, well, when addressing an employee whose performance has slipped, here are some things to consider, right? Empathy and understanding, right? Clear and specific feedback. What have I done in that area? Objective and non-confrontational approach, support, resources, open communication, goal setting. Now, all this is doing is providing just this general list. And there are more that were on here, but I just wanted you to understand, because you can create this prompt yourself. That for any one of these, I could go back in and say, well, could you provide more detail around number two, clear and specific feedback, and maybe give you some questions that I could utilize on that. So one of the other things I thought about, well, what if you're even sort of struggling with, I don't even know how to start asking questions. Chat can help you with that as well. And what I've done is, this is the initial prompt when you'd go on chat. You can see this, and it would say, from now on, when I ask a question, suggest a better version of that question and ask if I want to use your version instead. So what I've asked chat to do is to say, I'm going to ask you a question in this. If you think there's a better way that I should ask it, then recommend that and let me decide if I want to use your question or if I'm still going to use mine. So when I did that, right, it then says, sure. If you have a question, I'll read it. And if I think there's a better way to ask us, I'll give you a suggestion. So what I then did was I asked it the same question that I had asked before. And what it does is it says, here's an alternative that you can ask. Um, do you want to use that? I said yes. And then what it did was it provided that same list. So the first one is listed here. Here's the entire list. Again, almost very similar to the list that I had before. Now, again, there are a few more things on here. I actually like this list based on their question. Empathy, understanding, clear communication, active listening, objective assessments, right? Support and resources, goal setting. And again, for any one of these, I could say, well, could you give me a little more detail or understanding around what would be a good way to do objective assessments? Can you provide some guidance there? It will do that. So a couple other areas I could start to wonder, like, well, what are the reasons why there is often a decline in employee performance? And I could be specific in terms of the industry that we're in if I wanted to. So what it did again is it said, okay, well, here's an alternative way to ask this. Very similar to the way that I did. But what are 5 most common factors leading to a decrease in employees' performance? Do you want to use that one? I said, sure. Yes. So then what it did, it went down and said, okay, here are the 5 most important things: lack of motivation, burnout, and stress. If we were to go back and look at those needs, the social needs that we talked about, these would start to align. Lack of motivation, right? You can see there insufficient rewards, disconnect with employees' goals or values. Again, those fall back to those social needs. And I could even ask it, how does lack of motivation impact the scarf model or the needs? And it would go through and do that. So now I want to talk about the persona. And this is an act as. You see, I've got a picture here of Broadway, because really what we're asking chat to do is pretend you are this type of person and now answer this question. So I did a couple different ways. I said, first, act as an expert in all aspects of emotional intelligence and provide an outline of how a leader should approach an employee whose performance has declined. Now, I didn't ask it to rewrite the question, although I could have here. But what it starts to do is it says, okay, as an expert trained in emotional intelligence, here's an outline on what you can do, right? So understand your own emotions. I think that is so important, right? So for emotional intelligence, it's all about self-awareness first. What do I come with in regards to this employee? Are there biases that I already have in place that I need to recognize how to do that? So again, I could go deeper in this. I could say, could you give me maybe some activities or some questions that would help me to really understand more about my own emotions that might be impacting my ability to work with this employee in terms of their performance issues or what I perceive as their performance issues, right? So creative supportive environment. It's going to give me a couple suggestions on how to do that. Um, Emotionally intelligent communication. How am I going to do that? Start with positivity, express empathy, use active listening, be clear and specific. Now, again, for any one of these, I could then say, could you go into a little more depth on that? Could you provide examples for me? Could you provide questions for me on how to do that? It will then go sort of down that direction or branch off in that direction how I want to do that. I will say that when we ask questions, you want to make them simple. Don't ask multiple questions in the same prompt. Break it out into pieces, and the likelihood that you'll get better information is certainly going to be greater when we do that. So again, another one that I did was act as an expert trained in motivational interviewing and provide a detailed outline I can use to address an employee declining performance. And what it has done again is it's taken this model of motivational interviewing, which is one that I continue to promote with my clients. I think it's one of the best models out there in terms of a collaborative coaching model to help employees improve their performance. Because what it does is it creates an environment where they themselves talk about why they want to make the change, as opposed to me just saying this is what you're going to do, this is how you're going to do it. It's a much more effective way in terms of getting them to buy in to making the change. So that's one that we would use. So again, what this has done is if you're somewhat familiar with motivational interviewing, this provides an outline. It says, okay, well, here's what you're going to do. You're going to set the stage, right? You're going to create a collaborative environment first. You're going to express empathy on this. Then you're going to engage and you're going to build rapport. And this is how you're going to do it. You're going to start with open-ended questions, right? So can you tell me about your current projects and how you're finding them? Right. So it's just giving me suggestions. Now I could say, can you provide three more types of questions? You're going to focus on the issues, right? Identify the core issues. You're going to set an agenda. Really important here. We're going to set an agenda. We're going to elicit their perspective, right? We're going to what we call explore ambivalence. And again, there are more pieces to this, but I just wanted to give you a snapshot of what chat is providing for this based on my request of it acting as an expert. So I've given you two examples there, right? Act as an expert that is fully versed in emotional intelligence, and now act as an expert who's trained in motivational interviewing. We could do that for anything. What I wouldn't wanted to do is talk about, well, what about the interview prompt? What if you say like, geez, motivational interviewing seems really challenging at this point. I'm just starting to learn it. Well, then we could use an interview prompt. And I'll show you what that is. This is a prompt that I gave it. So it pulls in the persona prompt as well. It says act as in motivational interviewing, an expert in this area of motivational interviewing who is helping provide a specific outline of how to address a performance issue that I'm having with one of my employees. Right. So I've said, ChatGPT, act as somebody that is trained in motivational interviewing. And you're providing me guidance with this person. You're almost acting as a mentor. Right. And what I've said is ask me three questions. Now, I just put three because I wanted to limit the amount of engagement I would have. But I could say, ask me as many questions as you need to be able to gain enough information to be able to create an outline for this, or uh, ask me no more than 10 questions. But I just did it as three. Right. So three questions that will help me understand the problem I'm having. After I've answered three questions, then provide an outline specific to my employee. And what I've also asked it to do is ask me one question at a time. And the reason I do that is because if you didn't do that, what it might do is it might just list three questions. These are the three that you're going to want to answer. But I want this to be an interview with this person. I could even ask it to role play with me if I wanted. I could say, can you act as the employee? And I want to have the conversation now. This is the scenario. Can we go back and forth on this? And it will do that. Right. So here it is. Right. So certainly to better understand the performance issue you're experiencing with your employee, let's begin with the first question. Can you describe the specific performance issue that you're dealing with? So I just simply answered, yes, this employee has been missing project deadlines over the last 2 months. Thank you for sharing that. The next question will help clarify the situation. Have there been any changes in the employee's work environment, responsibilities, personal circumstances in the last 2 months that's impacting their performance? This provides an opportunity for me to reflect back on, geez, you know what? I didn't think about this, but maybe there are some things that are going on because that's going to impact how I go in and use motivational interviewing. So in this case, I simply said, none that I'm aware of. So if we move on, what it then said was, okay, understood. Let's proceed with the third question. How has this employee's performance been historically? Okay. They've generally been a good employee and met their deadlines consistently. So, what I've done here is sort of just given it very general information. Again, you can be as specific as you want on this. And the more you are, the better it's going to be. Okay. Thank you for that information. Based on your responses, here is a specific outline to address the performance issue that you're having, right? So, establish a supportive environment, engage and build rapport with this person, express empathy, identify discrepancies, explore ambivalence. And then again, there were more pieces to this that are not on here. But what I then did was I said, okay, well, number six was one that was important to me. And this was around developing discrepancy, which is a tool that's used in motivational interviewing. So I asked it, I said, can you provide more detail on number six, as well as specific questions I might ask? So now I'm really saying, okay, I'm getting a better understanding of how to use this, but can you help me out even more? So sure, I'll do that. More detail on step six, right? Objective reflection. Start by objectively stating the facts, right? In the past 2 months, right? Blah, blah, blah. Impact analysis. What's the impact of that been? What's been the personal relevance of that? What's the future projection? Where is this going to go if it doesn't change with this employee? And then it's provided me with questions that I might be able to ask for each one of those sections. So the reflection, the analysis, personal relevance, and then future projection. Now, again, I could say, okay, for self-reflection, could you give me 3 more options for any of those? And that's what it'll do. So you can see here again, these are 3 different options that we can use just to get started, right? There's the general, how do you ask the question? And if you're not really comfortable with how to ask the question, then you ask it to help you refine the question. And the more you do this, the better you become at understanding like, okay, it's really good when I ask it in this way. This gets better information when I refine it a little bit more in this. Acting as, right, that persona prompt. It's endless where you could go with this, right? I could ask it to act as an expert in behavioral economics or in behavioral psychology and explain to me what might be going on in the mind of this employee that's going through a performance review, things that I might be aware of or want to be aware of. It's endless how you can use this, and I think that's the value here is that you decide, and the better you are at creating the questions, you can go in any direction you want. And then the last one to me is this interviewing piece or even role playing where you could practice with this. And the benefit of that is that yes, as a coach, I promote this with my clients because it gives us an opportunity when we work together is to be even more efficient with our time in terms of understanding like what worked well, what didn't work well. Here are some suggestions in terms of what you might want to do going forward. It's a tool that can be really valuable in terms of how we use it. So as we wrap things up here, right? I think it's important for you to understand the social needs. Use chat to go into social needs. There's a model that I created called Cables that I use in conjunction with the needs model or SCARF model on a regular basis. And if you wanted to learn more about the Cables model that I created, you could go on to ChatGPT and say, "Can you provide an outline of Patrick Verino's Cables model that I can use with my employees?" And it would go through and it would list all of the behaviors that Cables talks about and how they impact your ability to create engagement with your employees or to address either current or avoid future issues with your employees. Endless ways to do that. So, right, so using ChatGPT doesn't mean you're cheating. This isn't about writing term papers and not, doing the work. This is about using it as a tool, but you have to understand what goes on behind, right? So the better you are at asking questions, the more you're going to get out of this. And I've just given you 3 basics, right? A general prompts, um, persona prompts, and then interview prompts. So I hope you found this valuable. If anybody wants to reach out to me outside of this, please shoot me an email or reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to have any further conversations in terms of helping you understand how you can use this yourself. Again, I think it's a great tool and it has great application in a lot of different areas. Um, and it's one that you really need to be able to add into your toolbox. So wishing you all the best. Hope you're able to go out there and rise above your best.